Most people believe money is a simple game of math: earn more, spend less, save the difference. But if that were true, why do so many smart, capable people still feel broke, anxious, or never truly satisfied? The truth is far more uncomfortable, because money isn't just numbers, it's psychology, identity, and emotion quietly shaping every decision you make. In The Art of Spending Money, Morgan Housel uncovers a deeper reality most people never question. The way you spend isn't random. It's a reflection of your fears, your past, your desires to be seen, and the invisible rules you've been following your entire life without even realizing it. Every purchase you make, every impulse you justify, every time you say "I deserve this," there's something deeper controlling that moment. And most people go their entire lives without ever seeing it. But here's the promise: by the end of this video, you won't just think differently about money, you'll start to recognize the hidden psychological patterns driving your choices, understand why you've been stuck in the same financial cycles, and most importantly, learn how to break them before they silently shape the rest of your life. Imagine walking through a crowded city where every person you pass carries an invisible shadow. These shadows aren't ghosts. They are the memories of every financial decision they've ever made, the fears inherited from their parents, and the desperate attempts to feel significant. We like to believe that when we open our wallets, we act as rational, calculating machines. We think we are weighing the utility of a purchase against its cost. But in the profound exploration of the art of spending, a much darker and more beautiful truth is revealed. Your spending is the most honest mirror of your soul. It is a psychological fingerprint. Doing well with money has surprisingly little to do with how smart you are, and almost everything to do with how you behave. And behavior is rarely governed by logic. It is governed by a complex cocktail of emotion, trauma, and the pursuit of a feeling we rarely ever name. The first realization we must face is that no one is crazy. This is perhaps the most liberating psychological shift you can make. When you see someone spending half their paycheck on a luxury watch while their debt is mounting, your first instinct is to judge them as mathematically illiterate. But through their eyes, that watch isn't a timepiece. It's armor. It is a signal to a world that once made them feel invisible that they have finally arrived. We spend money not to acquire things, but to solve internal problems. Every dollar that leaves your hand is a vote for a specific identity you want to inhabit. The problem is that most of us are trying to buy a version of ourselves that doesn't actually exist. We are financial toddlers trying to play a high-stakes game, using the broken mental models of our grandparents, navigating a 21st century economy with an evolutionary brain that is still terrified of being cast out of the tribe. Consider the dinner table. This is where the real financial decisions are made, not on a spreadsheet, but in the heat of a conversation or the silence of a secret regret. Our personal experience with money makes up perhaps 0.1% of what has happened in the financial history of the world. Yet it makes up 80% of how we think the world works. If you were born into a family that lost everything during a market crash, your spending software is coded with a deep, vibrating fear. You might save obsessively, but your saving isn't a sign of strength. It's a symptom of a wound that hasn't healed. Conversely, if you grew up in a culture where wealth was a sign of moral superiority, your spending becomes a frantic race to stay ahead of a social shadow that is always gaining on you. The psychology of spending is the study of these shadows. We have been conditioned to believe that wealth is what you see: the cars, the houses, the designer clothes. But a stinging correction is necessary. Wealth is the money that hasn't been spent. Wealth is the luxury of options you haven't taken yet. It is the silence of an unpurchased item. But psychology hates silence. Our brains are wired for the flash. We crave the dopamine hit of the transaction because, for a fleeting moment, the act of spending makes us feel powerful. It gives us a temporary sense of control over a chaotic world. Yet, this is a mathematical tragedy. When you spend money to show people how much money you have, the first thing you lose is the very money you wanted them to see. We trade our freedom for a status that lasts only as long as the next fashion cycle. We essentially risk what we have and need for what we don't have and don't even truly want. True financial awareness begins with empathy not for others, but for yourself. You have to look at your bank statement not as a list of numbers, but as a series of experiments in human behavior. Why did you buy that specific item at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday? Was it because you needed the object, or because you were feeling lonely, invisible, or bored? Every financial decision you've ever made sense to you at the moment you made it, given the information you had and your unique emotional state. When you realize that no one is crazy, you stop beating yourself up for past mistakes and start looking at your behavior with the cool, detached curiosity of a scientist. You realize that your neighbor's flashy car isn't necessarily a sign of their wealth, but a sign of their specific psychological need to be noticed, a need that might have been born from a childhood where they felt small. The hardest financial skill in the world is getting the goalposts to stop moving. Social comparison is a ceiling that doesn't exist. It is a ghost that you can never catch. Comparing yourself to someone who is more is a game that is rigged from the start, because there is always someone with a bigger house, a faster car, or a more curated life. The only way to win the game of social comparison is to refuse to play it. This requires a level of self-awareness that most of us are never taught. It requires us to define enough. Enough is the word the modern world hates because it is the death of greed. But enough is the only place where peace lives. If your expectations keep rising with your income, you will never be wealthy. You will simply be a more expensive version of a person who is still struggling. As we move deeper into this psychological landscape, we must recognize that the world is a giant, chaotic machine. Luck and risk are the invisible twins that dictate so much of our lives. Yet we treat them like strangers. We take 100% of the credit for our wins and 0% of the blame for our losses. But a wise spender realizes that their success is a roll of the dice, as much as a result of their talent. This humility is the secret to staying rich. It allows you to build a life that can survive the risks and be ready to capture the luck when it swings your way. Spending in its highest form is the art of buying time. It is the ability to wake up and say, I can do whatever I want today. That is the ultimate dividend money pays. Not the car, not the house, but the autonomy. In the end, the goal of understanding the psychology of spending isn't to become a better mathematician or a more efficient accumulator of capital. It is to become a more self-aware human being. Your wealth is simply the byproduct of your behavior, and your behavior is the byproduct of your internal world. Before you can fix your bank account, you must quiet the voices of your past that are telling you that you aren't enough. You must realize that a lottery ticket is often a possibility fee for those who feel they have no other way to dream. You must see the why behind the what. When you master the mental game of money, you realize that the most valuable thing you can ever own is your own peace of mind. You stop spending to prove your worth to people you don't even like, and you start spending to build a life that is rich in meaning, connection, and freedom. Because at the end of the day, money is just a tool, but your psychology is the hand that holds it. If the hand is shaking with fear or greed, the tool will always be dangerous. But if the hand is steady with self-awareness, the tool can build a masterpiece. Your spending is your story. Make sure it's a story worth telling. Why do individuals with the highest IQs often possess the lowest net worths? Why does the person who can solve complex differential equations struggle to solve the simple equation of their own retirement? To understand this, we must descend into the labyrinth of the human mind, past the logic of the prefrontal cortex and into the raw, pulsating heat of the limbic system. This is where your financial destiny is actually decided, not in the classroom, but in the dark corners of your subconscious where ego, envy, and the fear of social death reside. Smart people make poor financial choices because they suffer from the expert's curse. When you are highly intelligent, you believe that you can outsmart the market. You assume that because you understand the mechanics of the world, you can predict its chaos. But money is not a physics problem. It is a sociology problem. The market is not a machine that follows laws. It is a collection of millions of people making decisions based on their own private traumas and public insecurities. The brilliant mind sees a pattern and bets everything on it, forgetting that a single one in a million Event a risk like the one that took Kent Evans can erase a lifetime of smart decisions. At the heart of every poor financial choice by a brilliant person is the struggle with social signal. We are tribal creatures. For thousands of years, to be seen as lesser meant being cast out of the tribe, which meant certain death. Today, that ancient fear manifests as the need to buy things we don't need to impress people we don't like. Smart people are often the most susceptible to this because they feel a deep internal pressure to look as successful as their intellect suggests they should be. They use their spending to validate their IQ. They trade their most valuable asset, their freedom, for a metal box on wheels or a specific zip code, all to quiet the voice in their head that whispers, "If you're so smart, why don't you have what they have?" This is the psychological trap of linear thinking in an exponential world. A smart person understands that if they work 10% harder, they should get 10% more results. That is linear logic. But compounding is exponential, and exponential growth is inherently unintuitive. It looks like nothing for a very long time before it looks like everything. Smart people, used to quick results and intellectual rewards, get frustrated during the boring phase of wealth building. They start tinkering. They move their money. They chase the next trend. They try to find the shortcut. In doing so, they dig up the seeds of their future wealth just to see if they're growing, effectively killing the process. We must also confront the illusion of control. The more you know, the more you feel you are in the driver's seat. But the psychology of money teaches us that the world is a chaotic machine. You can do everything right and still lose. You can do everything wrong and still win. Smart people find this reality offensive. They would rather believe in a flawed formula than in the raw power of luck. They over-leverage themselves because their math says they're safe, failing to realize that room for error is the only thing that actually keeps you in the game. Wealth is not about being right. It's about not being wrong often enough to be forced to quit. The ultimate tragedy of the smart person is the inability to find enough. Greed is not a financial problem. It is a psychological insecurity. It is the fear that without more, you are less. When a millionaire risks their reputation for a few more dollars, they aren't being stupid, they are being driven by a shadow from their past. That tells them their worth is tied to their rank in the hierarchy. They have the software of a survivor installed in a life of abundance. And that mismatch leads to catastrophic choices. To move past this, one must cultivate financial empathy. You must realize that your brain is wired to sabotage your wealth. You must stop looking at your bank account as a scorecard for your intelligence, and start looking at it as a tool for your autonomy. The goal is not to be the smartest person in the room. It is to be the most self-aware, because a janitor who understands his own behavior will always outperform a genius who is a slave to his own ego. Wealth is the byproduct of a quiet mind that knows when to stop, while poverty is often the result of a brilliant mind that doesn't know how to stay still.